So we're really unpacking and exploring this idea of cognitive flexibility. And here, I don't want to teach you anymore, but instead, what I would like to do now is share with you a story, right? What I don't, or what I hope we'll never do as helpers, as cognitive behavioral therapists, is ever undermine the power of a story. Now, it's important that we acknowledge that all people have different learning styles, different preferred ways of absorbing and retaining information. I'll share with you an idea I think in the last video of this section, just exploring learning styles, something we really want to understand, appreciate, and acknowledge. Stories I think I've mentioned have been this mode or this vehicle through which one generation has historically passed on its insights, understandings, lifetimes worth of learnings to the generation following for millennia, all right? And I don't think this is ever going to change. Sometimes as social scientists and cognitive thinkers, we can sometimes rely more on the rational part of our minds than on the emotional stroke, relational stroke, kinesthetic stroke, personal part of ourselves and our beings. Remember, we're working with real people here. Now, I want to share with you a story, all right? This is a true story, and I just want you to see what it is that you learn through the story, all right? How it is that you can relate a principle from the story to yourself and your own situation or your own practice, or to the way in which you currently relate to people in life. Now, I don't know about you, but I went through probably a large stage of my life feeling insufficient. I felt quite insignificant. It was actually one of the reasons why I joined the army. I wanted to do something that I perceived to be meaningful with my life. All right. Now, obviously, I left around about the age of 24 or 25, whatever it was, quite disheartened because I hadn't really done anything that I found to be meaningful or significant. Well, nothing that seemed significant to me anyway. All right. Remember, all we're doing at all times is operating out of our perception. All right. So here I was. I'd travelled the world and I'd found my way back in Scotland. And I was studying the social sciences. I'm studying psychology. I'm studying sociology at the time. I think part-time I was studying counselling, therapeutic counselling. I was studying neurolinguistic programming. You name it. I pretty much immersed myself in full-time study, not just studying full-time courses, but part-time courses at the same time, weekend courses for quite a number of years. I really immersed myself in this learning, self-reflection, self-exploration experience. I wanted to understand me so that in turn I could better understand and also better relate to other people. Now, I hadn't really started sharing with anyone what it was that I'd started learning. And don't you know in life that unless we are sharing that which we're learning, then we're not really going to grow so much in what we're learning. Have you ever heard the saying that life is kind of like a fountain, isn't it? Just a little bit. Where in order for us to live a balanced and stable life, it's important that if we are like a well, there's as much being poured into our life as what there is coming out. All right. Now, I've known some people over the years who approach life from this perspective of, what can I get, what can I get, what can I get? And I know some people who'll take courses like this and they'll read books, but because they have no outlet, because they don't share that which they're learning with anyone else, they become intellectually stubborn, intellectually fat, so full of ideas and concepts and theories and practices, but because they don't actually put the principles they're learning into practice, they gain no insights or understanding on how to put them into play and actually use them. So this is what I didn't want to do, right? I didn't want to become just, a head full of ideas and theories and concepts. I wanted to become a more valuable human being, and I'm pretty sure that you can relate to what I'm talking about here. So, I had a few mentors at the time. I had a number of teachers, so I was receiving a lot, but I didn't really have anyone to start sharing what I was learning with. So I was actually walking through Dunfermline, my hometown, one day, where I bumped into a guy standing selling the Big Issue magazine. Now, in the UK here, the Big Issue is like a magazine that people who are perhaps living in homeless hostels or who are a little bit down on their luck, they'll go and they'll buy some magazines and they can stand in. I think they get to sell the magazines for twice what they buy them for, and they obviously keep the profits. So it's like a social enterprise, a charitable initiative. So if I see a person standing around selling the Big Issue, I'll generally buy one. Why? Because I would rather encourage a person who's doing something than a person who's just sitting around begging for change, not doing anything. I like to really encourage activity, all right? But that's just me. So anyway, this guy, Chris, the day that I met him, now as I've mentioned, I was studying full time. So I didn't have much spare money going about. I think I was down to my last £20 of the month. Now, I think it was about 2 days before I got my student loans and all my bursaries, and I was doing a few little part-time jobs at the time as well. And I met Chris, and he says, "Oh, would you like to buy a big issue?" And I saw the guy, and he was quite a likeable guy. You could tell he was a bit of a rogue. So I ended up, it was teeming down with rain here in Scotland, a very wet and druch day, as we say here in Scotland. And I says, "Right, listen, Chris, I'm going to get some lunch. How about you come, let's have a conversation, see where you're at. I'd love to understand your story." And that was it. And here in my mind, I'm thinking, right, I'm going to make you my people project. That's what I wanted to do. That was my real agenda, by the way. So, to cut the story short, over the weeks and months that followed, I ended up developing a bit of a relationship with Chris. I just liked the guy. Granted, he was stuck in this vicious circle, going round and round, drink and drugs, and his life was absolute chaos. But to be honest with you, I would meet with Chris sometimes once, sometimes twice a week. Meet him for coffees, or would take him for a bite to eat some food. Sometimes I'd buy him some groceries, and I would share with him that I'd learned. And it became a bit of a habit. Every single week, we would meet up in the local Costas or Starbucks, and Chris would say, "So what are you learning this week?" And it was like when he saw me, he would just come to life. And I would share him what I'd been learning, any theories, any concepts, any models, any processes, something like this. And it was fine. I felt like I was giving back in some way, kind of like I was making a difference. But to be honest, around about 18 months then passed. And do you know what had changed about Chris's life? Nothing. All right. I continued to meet Chris and would go for coffees, and I'm like getting to the stage now. My goodness, why is your life exactly the same? My life had transformed the way in which, I would relate to myself, relate to other people. I was starting to get ahead and, business as well. I think I started my first business at that point. And I was putting what I was learning into practice in the context of my own life. I was relating everything to me. Chris was doing nothing. He was going nowhere. Nothing was changing. I was getting so frustrated. And eventually I ended up going to speak to one of my mentors at the time, a guy named Jimmy. And I says, "Jimmy, I don't think I'm cut out for this helping lark, mentoring people, coaching people. I'm studying counselling and CBT and all these different modalities in the social sciences, and I'm giving Chris everything. I'm giving him all my best stuff. I'm teaching him. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I'm doing the next thing. But nothing's changing. I don't think I'm cut out for this. I think I should just quit and maybe go back to doing what I used to do, which was sales, marketing, and business development." And Jimmy says, "Right, Kane, it seems like you're ready to change something. Are you ready to start thinking differently?" And I said, "What do you mean? Of course I am. What am I missing here? What don't I know that I need to know?" And he says, "Well, there's a principle when it comes to helping people, Kane. All right? And this is, you can't want more for other people than what they want for themselves. I'm going to make a recommendation, all right? Make a suggestion. Just see how this resonates with you. Why don't you stop wasting your time with the Chris's of the world and start investing your time wisely into the Kanes?" And that was it. Like the lights went on, the veils, the scales fell off my eyes. It was like I could see life and people from this whole new perspective through this experience, this story. Right? What I was able to see was that no one had taken responsibility for me. It's not like I ever had someone who came into my life and was that person, the teacher, the mentor, the role model. I didn't really have that, not in the way that I was being this person for Chris. And I was making life too easy for him. I was giving him everything. All right, Chris was reliant on me for his growth, for his development, which meant that he didn't have to put any work in himself. And when I understood this idea, Kane, invest into the Kanes of the world and stop wasting your time in the Chris's. This wasn't saying Chris is a bad guy, not saying that whatsoever, right? But what he's saying is, if you want to be effective as a CBT practitioner, as a coach, as a helper, as a manager, as a leader, as whatever, you've got to identify those people who are of the same attitude and outlook is you. Because some people are going to be waiting for someone to come into their lives and fix them and own them and take responsibility for them. And then you're going to have some people who are just desperate and ready to change because their desire to change has become greater than the desire to remain the same. All right, so I share this story with you. Why? Because I'm hoping you can relate on some level. And if you can relate, there's a pretty good chance that you might have become slightly more cognitively flexible through the process. But you can take the principle from the story and apply it in a few different areas of life. Perhaps in your day-to-day relationships, perhaps in your future business. If you go on to start working with clients, my friend, it's entirely up to you. The one thing that I do know for certain though is once a mind has been stretched, it never resorts back to its original form. The Chris Principle. What do you take from the story, all right? And what might this mean for you moving forward?